This is 180 as we have a look back at the events of today and the week. I'm Paul Murray. Here with me is Dan Ganane, Prue McSween and John Stanley, discussing a whole bunch of stuff, including a story today that we learnt about, which was that there is a Sydney woman who was forced to give birth to her latest child at home after, despite actually going to hospital. Went to hospital. Hospital said, sorry lady, you're not close enough to giving birth. She goes home. Eventually she has to give birth inside the house. Now look, this is an ongoing series of stories that we get about people who turn up to hospitals and then they seem to fail them. But I'll put this to the table. I actually back the doctors here. Not because I don't view the obvious passion here, but these people, I believe their default setting is to take care of people, not to stuff people over and not to push people to the back of the queue. Am I completely off the mark here?
Should the woman have planned ahead? She had 9 months to get this right. Oh, you should have known that she was going to get... Hang on, Prue, before you jump down my throat. I'm not taking an anti-female stance here. Should the hubby and the wife have planned ahead and known that, well, there's a good chance they're going to fall into labour at a particular stage and been ready for it?
You can't predict that, Dan. You know,
I think she should predict that at roughly
So what did you want her to do? Have a bed in the back of the lorry so that and just circle around the hospital?
Don't we live in a world now, Prue, where we pretty much have to get private medical, otherwise we get punished via a Medicare levy?
Well, you know, I'm all for that. But frankly, while we've got this system which allows people to, you know, bludge off the rest of us, let's face it, you know, people who in fact can afford it are able to go and get free health care. Until we can find a government that's got the balls to change that and to recognise that we cannot afford free health in this country, then, you know, we are going to have women who are having blasted home births and people who are miscarrying in toilets and whatever else.
Well, it's that thing. The miscarriage in the toilet is an obvious case of disgrace. But there are plenty of those other ones that come up, and it's definitely not being heartless. But our expectations of the police is that the second something might happen to us, they'll be at our front door within 30 seconds. The second that something gets warm in our place, the fire department will be there, and a month before we get sick, there'll be a bed in hospital. Do we have slightly out of control expectations that we sort of think that healthcare is similar to fast food, John?
Well, I've got a slightly different view on healthcare. I actually think 99% of people get a very good experience in the Australian healthcare system, and we've probably got the best system in the world.
Have you been in an emergency waiting room lately?
Yes, I have, yeah.
And how many hours did you have to wait?
Half an hour.
And they must have known who you were. You pull so much.
Half an hour.
You have so much pull in this town.
Half an hour, Prue.
Did you say, don't you know who I am?
No, Prue.
Well, you did a Belinda Neal.
Okay, let's have sensible conversation.
Yeah, right.
Now, 99% of people...
But you'd be the only person who'd have a half-hour wait in an emergency room. It's serious.
So you're telling me that everyone... I mean, so you know,
I've actually been to the emergency room 3 times in 3 months.
And I'm aware of that, and I know.
But I've had to wait... The shortest period I had to wait was about 2.5 hours.
I know. I'm just saying to you that most people get treated in hospitals and they have a very good experience. When you open the phone lines, most people will ring you and praise the work of the doctors and the nurses. But the health system and the hospital system is so huge and it's straining because the costs have blown out. New South Wales,
because it's free.
New South Wales in the middle of the 90s, the health system costing $5 billion, they're now spending 3 times as much, $15 billion. They still can't keep up because the cost of treatment is just just blowing out enormously.
It's the demand, John.
Yes, that's right. And the point about that is that while you've got doctors and you've got nurses and there's a lot of stress, people are going to make mistakes, and people are going to have. And
well, you can be an apologist for it, or you can say, why is it happening? What can we do to fix it?
Or you can actually do some homework and look into it and look at the bigger picture. You can wheel out your anecdotal evidence of individual cases.
So what is the homework that you've done, the study that you've done to tell us what's wrong with it?
What I've done is I've spent a lot of time talking to people who work in the system, and I've asked them questions about how it works. And I think when you compare it with the systems overseas,
Bangladesh.
No, United States, the United Kingdom, most places in Europe, most Western countries have got the same problems in trying to deal with the health system. It's not collapsing around our ears, but we need to pour more money into it. We should have a higher Medicare levy. We should pour more money into the health system.
And we should means
absolutely
test
no doubt.
But the thing is that if you turn around and have a higher Medicare levy, which I think people would accept, you can't have scenarios where even anecdotally you end up waiting several hours before you get in.
But you will have have always.
But you've
because
got, you know
but
what I
you
mean.
will always have a situation where you'll have an emergency room where suddenly 20 people will turn up in 1 hour. You can't plan people getting sick. And the big test will come next week, because we've now got, in New South Wales, there's the equivalent of a public hospital worth of people in hospital beds with swine flu. Next week, when the schools go back, it's going to be even greater. Probably the biggest test the hospital system's ever had is going to be next week, when all these swine flu cases really start to build up, and we'll see then how they cope. And we'll hear
you know the
horror
answer.
stories.
Don't hold by the shirt and curlies. I can tell you now, it ain't going to cope.
Okay, well, that's good.
We'll move
Terrific.
on to some other stuff very shortly, but Dan,
I was just going to say, it was always my dream in life to work with the late Stanzimatic, and I think I'm working with the late. She's channeled Stanzimatic right now. It's wonderful. I love it.
Stan's very proud. He's watching us in 16 by 9. He's very, very proud. Now, look, let's talk about what I think's been a fairly nasty week for the media. Two stories in particular. One of the biggest stories has been a story, of course, in Sydney, which has been an entire family that was murdered. Only one member of that family survived that attack, and they flew back into the country. The person, the teenage girl who has lost her entire family, remember, was trying to cover her face, didn't want to be seen at all, yet still the cameras rolled. About a week ago, when we were telling you about the Jakarta bombings, we started to know that Australians had been killed in that. There was a Perth man who died. His wife turned up to Perth International Airport, again, covered around by cameras, trying to cover her face, similar to that you would see someone out the front of court or something like that, who doesn't want to be seen. But unlike somebody outside of court, this is somebody who didn't want to be seen at a moment of extreme grief, yet everyone ran the pictures anyway. There was an Australian soldier who died this week as well. The family, through the Defence Minister and Defence personnel, said, please don't say what his name is. Not only did we know what his name was, but newspapers and TV stations, including this very one, went through his Facebook page and ran photos of that dead soldier. I think it's a pretty dodgy week for the media when people who did nothing wrong, apart from have tragedy brought upon them, are treated in exactly the same way as a celebrity who's walking around saying, look at me, look at me.
Okay, we know the media is not the moral beacon of society, or society's moral beacon. Shouldn't there be legislation against this?
Bloody oath.
In America, you can't show a dead body coming off the plane from Afghanistan because there is legislation. So you can blame the media.
That's more for political propaganda and the party.
Correct,
And the
but they have the power
It's not
to legislate
sensitivity.
against that, to say, okay, well, you can't show a dead body, you can't show Facebook pictures. The government, it would only take one law.
Censoring media like that. What about war zones? I mean, you can't. There are innocent victims everywhere.
That's fair, but if the family's turned around and it's just, I understand that this is often, if not always, an amoral, heartless, opportunistic business. But I don't understand why any news director saw the pictures of a woman who was turning up to go to another country to identify her dead husband, seeing a woman who doesn't want to be photographed and saying, you know what, run those pictures. Where's the basic humanity that says, look, you know what, no one is going to be the poorer for not seeing
There's
this
no
image.
humanity when you're trying to chase ratings or
Absolutely.
circulation. And unfortunately, that's the bottom line. And, you know, frankly, the viewers, the readers, want to see those pictures. You know, and
But John,
that's the bottom line.
you've managed these things.
Look,
Am I off the
I think.
field
Look,
here?
I tend to agree with Dan, and I think there are some privacy laws that have been put forward by the federal government, which some media organisations think go too far, which do give people some rights to privacy. And I think it's a difficult one. If you've published photos on Facebook, you've published them. You've published them. They're open to be seen. Now, if you've done that, and then, unfortunately, if someone has Facebook photos, then they lose their life. Do you then change the rules so that those photos that have been published aren't available?
But very different. I mean, Facebook in particular is a site where you meter who gets to see those photos. And that's what makes me think that there is still a fundamental invasion. It's not somebody who's just put something up on Flickr or some sort of other sharing site and just said, have a look at my crazy night, you know, on the booze. I just think, and particularly, if there's one case apart from any, it's apart from the Facebook thing, it's just that woman in Perth. Like, why do we have to add to her grief?
But what do? You structure a law that says if somebody says, I don't want my picture used, and they can then say, the law says that they can not have their picture used or published by a media organisation. So what happens if you get?
It's workable.
Yeah, but what happens then if you get somebody? You know, you think of the shots of Christopher Skase or whoever it is, someone who's on the run. None of us would say, well, they're entitled to say their pictures can't be used because it's a rogue that is that has put themselves into a situation of public disgrace, and they shouldn't be allowed to hide from that.
And imagine that situation. You've got, you know, that 7 cameras were there, 9 cameras were there, 10 cameras were there. What is the 7 chief of staff going to say? We'll let 9 run it, but we won't run it? Of course, they've all got to run it because they know the other guy's going to run it, so they've got to run it.
But there's an interesting one because in a New South Wales home, there's a story this week, and this has been beamed around the country, where there's a 15-year-old girl who's severely disabled. She's in one of those homes, and she's not meant to be in a home with an adult, and this adult has attacked her, and she's been viciously attacked and bitten, and her face is disfigured, and all those images have been in the papers and on television news bulletins. And I read this afternoon a commentary on this on Crikey, where they were raising the point that she's 15.
Yes.
And her pictures were used. And I'll be honest, as I was reading the commentary, that was the first time it occurred to me, well, yeah, she is 15. Yeah. Has she given permission for those shots to be used?
She wasn't really...
and even if she has given permission, she's in a home. She's 15.
And it's that thing where, look, you know, it is ever a race to the bottom, and the reality is that anyone who does turn around and starts drawing a line in the sand will probably quickly lose their job because somebody else will get the competitive advantage. And I know that, look, what I'm saying is essentially spitting in the wind, but it annoys me that the chief analysis of media is about, you know, whether things are misspelt or not, or whether, you know, who's up and who's down and numbers and personality, and no one ever talks from time to time about those effects, the humanity effects of what we do. And I just think from time to time...
Media can't legislate itself. It's got to be done from above.
No, exactly. Look, what do you think about this? 0409 180 140. There's a whole bunch of other stuff to talk about before we are done tonight, but I wanted to show you what I think is the best bit of video of the week. How's this for, I don't know, Daredevil, Adventure? I just think this is awesome. This bloke, as you can see, is on a roller coaster on roller skates. Of all of the stupid things to do with your life, but this bloke, if you go and check him out on YouTube, I don't know, German, Austrian, who cares? But what he does is that he has set all types of world speed records when it comes to skates. He's driven behind cars, behind boats. He's fantastic. Check him out on YouTube. More 180 in a sec.